And we are live. Good evening, guys, and welcome to the stream. I'm very happy to have you because it's the first season, not the first season, the first interview of the season. We're back with interviews with members of the European Parliament, and I'm even more happy because tonight, so we have an MEP, the first one of 2023. That's a good thing in itself. But the second thing where I'm very happy to have this interview tonight is because our guest is the 70th MEP to come on the channel, meaning that from tomorrow I can brag and say 10% of the European Parliament came on the channel to do interviews and other things. So I'm very happy to pass this threshold with all of you. But yeah, let's get into it. So tonight, our guest is an MEP. The MEP is David Lega. So he's from the EPP group. So we're standing on the right side of EU politics. So David Lega is a Swedish MEP. He's been elected in 2019. So that's his first mandate. He's 49 years old. He happens to have a disability. We will discuss that probably a bit during the interview. So yeah, he has his arms that are paralyzed. So if you see him like reach out for a bottle, that's why. But we'll be discussing a bit that because he's also working on as what we call the disability intergroup. So we'll cover that during the interview. Beyond that, he is a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, member of the Subcommittee on Human Rights, and he is a substitute in the Committee on Budgetary Control and the Special Committee on Foreign Interference. And on top of that, he's a co-founder of a friendship group with Uyghur and a member, or the co-chair, I forgot, he will remind us, of the intergroup on children's rights. But before we cover, and just so I said he's in the Droit committee and in the Affairs committee, so the Foreign Affairs committee. Within this committee, he follows particularly EU-Iran relationships, also Ukraine and Russia, of course, given the context. But before we start our conversation, as usual, I remind you of the house rules, particularly for those of you who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will be with us for about an hour. After that, he will go and enjoy the rest of his evening. And you will be stuck with me for another half an hour to discuss with you what you thought of the interview, share my own interpretation of things, provide additional explanation, these sort of things. You know how it goes. So as usual, we will only talk about EU politics. So no national politics unless it's linked to EU politics. So keep that in mind when suggesting a question, because of course you have a chat, you can suggest questions. I will keep an eye on it. But as usual, in your remarks, in your comments, stay civil, don't spam, the usual. And on this note, I suggest that we dive right into it. Sorry. Good evening, David Lega. Thank you very much for being with us tonight and welcome. So I'm like I said, I'm very happy to have you because you're an MEP. I'm always happy to have MEPs, but also because you're 70th MEP to come on the channel. So it's a threshold for me. So a bit before we were first. Did I miss anything when introducing you in my introduction? Anything else that you would like to mention about you before we dive into it?
Good evening. No, thank you for having me. No, I think you mentioned it was quite a thorough introduction.
Perfect.
I'm happy with it. So.
All right. Well, then let's dive into it. So. Can you a bit, so it's your first mandate, you've been elected in 2019, so can you tell us a bit how and why did you go into politics and then later became an MEP? What was the spark for you?
It's a hard question. I mean, you said it briefly as well. I was born in 1973 with a severe disability, so I have no movement in my arms at all and just a little in my legs, but I was born completely paralyzed and no one thought that I would ever be able to sit up even. And so that was sort of my verdict when I was born. And I started training, got a lot of help from physiotherapists, from healthcare, from my family, from everyone around school, which meant that I started developing. I went to regular schools, but I also found an interest in sports. And that's mainly because I hated physiotherapy more than anything. I think if you like and enjoy physiotherapy, you have a problem with your sense of humor, really. But I needed to do something to train, but still enjoy it. So I moved towards sports, and I really enjoyed it, and went into swimming. And after 15 years after that, I entered my first Paralympics as a swimmer. I did 2, took many world records as an athlete. And then when I retired, I went all over Sweden, Europe, the US, talking about how to reach your goals and how to give more children the chance to really develop to the maximum of their abilities. I spoke about leadership to big tech all over the world, and then I had a chance and a question: why don't you go into politics? And I thought about it for a long time, and then I decided that it was also a chance to reach more people, to trying to change the world in a good way. I think many people who go into politics do it because something happened to them that weren't that good. I did for the completely other reason. I did it because everyone treated me right, and I would like to give more people the same possibilities as I had. Long answer, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's a very interesting story as well. So that's fine by me that you take the time to explain it. So now you're in Parliament, and sorry, we're gonna start with not the best best side of Parliament, because given the context, you're the first MEP that we are welcoming since after the Qatargate scandal, so the corruption scandal that has been rocking the Parliament and Brussels for months now. So we have to discuss it. You've been right in the middle of the Qatargate, being a member of the European Parliament with all the scrutiny around it. So, and now there is a lot of question on how can the Parliament reform itself in terms of rule of transparency. There's a lot of discussion. So, how far do you think the Parliament should go to, let's say, solve the potential loopholes in the transparency rules and regain a bit the trust of the public and credibility out there?
I mean, Qatargate and everything surrounding it was horrible. It was a large blow to our democratic institution and to all of us. In that way, I think it's quite similar to when athletes are found guilty of doping. Because you don't only blame the athletes who did something illegal, you start suspecting everyone. And that's where in the risk where we are right now, that every politician, every member of the European Parliament is suspected just because a few probably did something horrible. I want to wait until we actually have seen the verdict before saying that someone is guilty. But it's a terrible blow, and I think that we do need to be really careful not to do too little in our response to this, but also we have to be a bit careful and make sure that we do the right things. Transparency, it sounds, for example, transparency, it sounds so obvious and crystal clear. Why shouldn't you register every meeting with every person that you meet? But I mean, in my capacity, I work a lot, as you said in the beginning, with the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang province. I work a lot with freedom fighters in Hong Kong. If I have to register when I meet people from Hong Kong, freedom fighters coming to our parliament here, their families might suffer. They actually might punish their families for meeting me. So it's not crystal clear on where and how to draw the line. So I think that absolutely more transparency, absolutely. But we also need to make sure that the limitations we provide will actually affect those who want to break the rules and not the others trying to do the best job they can to protect democracy around the world.
And so, like,
it is a balance that.
And where do you see that balance then? What potential measures would sound like reasonable for you to take that would not be too burdensome for like the majority of MPs who are just doing their job and make things more difficult or prevent illegal actions like the one that allegedly occurred under Qatargate?
Well, my point is that those who want to break the rules, just like in sports again, the people using doping will always be ahead of the testers. And it's the same when it comes to these rules. So we need to make sure that the rules really limit the people who want to do something and not only look as good flagships for transparency without actually protecting it. For example, absolutely transparency when it comes to which organizations do we meet and how, but should we really name everyone that is fighting for democracy? Just one example. So I want to wait and see all the suggestions after now they are being discussed in our groups. I'm just saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's try to do it the right way.
I have a first question in the chat related to the Qatargate. So we know that a number of, some former MEPs and one current MEP and some current MEPs are involved in this. There are procedure to lift their immunity because MEPs enjoy a legal immunity to allow them to do their job. And so the question is, why does it take so long to lift the immunity of MEPs that are arrested or that are involved in such things? Should the immunity just be lowered by default until the investigation is finished? So
to lift the, I'm sorry, I had a problem.
The immunity, the legal immunity.
The immunity, sorry. Yes. Well, why does it take so long? Because, I think that it's also important. I mean, we have this immunity rule sometimes for a reason, to protect that we aren't, as MEPs, accused of something that is not true, if we're opposition in some countries, for example. So that it should be hard to raise the immunity. It should be discussed, but it should also be crystal clear that this is a case. If these people are found guilty of this, that there should be no immunity involved at all. But it should be, the immunity is there to protect the possibility for opposition parties to do their jobs.
So still on the Qatargate, a bit linked. So, like I said, you are a member of the subcommittee on human rights, the droit subcommittee, and as it happened, a lot of things around the Qatargate happened around this subcommittee. And so, my question is: do you think that the work of this subcommittee has been a bit tainted, given the various revelations that we've seen in the Qatargate? And do you think that the committee droit can, I would say, be able to salvage its reputation and regain the credibility that it once had? How much do you see? How bad do you see the damage on your committee?
Well, I think absolutely there is a damage on the droit committee for this, and I myself have been quite upset for many of the items on the agenda, for example, where it has seemed extremely biased in many different perspectives before, which we all have raised and discussed. I mean, my party, EPP, and me, we even walked out on some meetings because we thought that this is not a serious and professional discussion. So we needed to have a discussion on how to actually make the droit work more credible, because it's extremely important. A subcommittee on human rights is important and vital in a democracy, and therefore it's even more important that committee functions well, and that the credibility of its work is high. So I really do look forward to seeing what's going to happen with a new chair, with more scrutiny coming into it, because it is important, but it also needs to be run the right way.
You were mentioning that the EPP walked out of some hearings because you were disagreeing with the topic on the agenda, like for instance.
Not only topic. I mean, we even had meetings where invitees to sit in the panels were designated terrorist organizations.
Okay, concretely, what example do you have in mind?
From the Palestinian territories, we had people connected to that were linked to terrorist organizations, which meant that we as EPP said that we don't discuss and we don't negotiate with terrorist organizations. And since the Bureau still demanded that they stay, we had to walk out because that's not what we do.
Okay, interesting.
And that's a year ago.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
So, and I mean, just one more thing on Qatargate. Eva Kaili was one of my vice chairs in the intergroup on children's rights. We did several engagements together before this. So even on a personal level, when you got to know someone, you feel fooled, you feel hurt, you feel ashamed that but that's why these things are so important, that it comes up into the air and that we act. And what we did directly, since she was our vice chair on children rights, we suspended her the same day the suspicions were. We haven't excluded her because we do want, as everyone else, we need to wait for the verdict and to see. because we live in a society that's run by rule of law, and we need to respect that.
Another question coming from the chat, still on Qatargate, and it relates
Sorry
to
for my coffee.
No problem. It relates a bit about current debate that are in the parliament. It's about the place of NGOs in the parliament. So we know that in Qatargate there are a couple of NGOs that were headed by people who are involved in the Qatargate. And so there is a question about potential undue influence of fake NGOs, so to say, that have been active in the parliament and in Brussels. So overall, like the question is, do you think there is a lot of undue influence from NGOs in the parliament in general? Do you think that the current system of lobbying is currently transparent enough? So what's your take on that?
No, I think transparency we need to improve on transparency. We just have to figure out how to do it without risking the safety and security of people meeting us. As I said, I think that's important. But also, my job is to meet people and find information. That's what I base my opinion on. That doesn't mean that I listen blindly and follow everyone that I meet. That's why I'm democratically elected, to represent my constituency, which is Sweden. Mm-hmm. So my job is to evaluate the information I hear, not to simply agree with it, regardless if it's from businesses, from NGOs, or from countries. I need to listen to many people, hear their views, take them into account, and then make up my mind based on my part, together with my party and our ideology. How should we act in this? And it would be very hard to do that if I would be forbidden to meet people. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes I think politicians meet too few people rather than too many.
Okay. And final question on Qatargate, and then we move on what you actually do, like in your normal work. You are the
There is no normal work here.
Yeah, I mean, I say that. I've been in the parliament, so yeah, I'm saying that as much as normalcy can exist in the parliament. So you are the co-founder of the Uyghur Friendship Group, so an informal gathering of MEPs that are similarly interested about one thing. So here, the friendship group with Uyghur.
Yes.
In the context of the discussion to react to the Qatargate, one idea that is being discussed is to forbid and to ban in the future friendship groups such as these, to avoid undue influence from the outside, and because there's not a lot of transparency on it necessary, etc. So do you agree with this idea of potentially banning friendship groups?
I think that we need to discuss who and what to ban and in what perspective. I mean, it's not only the Uyghur Friendship Group doesn't represent the relationships with one country. We don't act as a delegation. I mean, we have these formal institutions within the European Parliament, a delegation to a certain country, and then we can have a friendship group that acts exactly the same way, almost with the same country, which means that the friendship group sometimes might risk of doing the delegation's work. And that is a problem, and it has been for a while. But we also have other friendship groups that doesn't strictly adhere to the same boundary or the same country perspective as the other friendship group do, which is Uyghur is one of them. I mean, we have here a group of people that is persecuted, tortured, discriminated, but also put in concentration camps. There's a genocide ongoing in the Xinjiang province right now, and I don't think that we would have been able to find all the information and also round up the support to actually make the European Parliament acknowledge the serious risk of genocide ongoing, as we did in a resolution a while ago, without also having the possibility to meet and discuss with people outside of our own political trenches and outside of our own political parties. So groups matter, and groups are important. Networks across parties are important. We have a unique possibility to raise awareness towards the Uyghur community and the people who are suffering, which is important in so many different ways. But we also need to make sure that other friendship groups aren't doing delegations work. Mm-hmm. So the discussion is relevant, but we need to. I think it's important to see where we land.
Yeah, it's not a black or white kind of discussion. They are not everything has to be banned, and
it's depending. No, I don't think everything should be banned. I really understand the problem if we have something like a friendship group working at the exact same perspective as a delegation.
Okay, interesting. Go ahead. So you wanted to say something?
But I think that is a really relevant criticism, because then we have a formal structure with the political balance as it should be in the delegation, and then we have a friendship group that is run on the side. That is a problem. Mm-hmm. But also for us to gather and find information and meet and connect and discuss issues are extremely important.
Makes sense. Let's go ahead.
But this is more relevant, I think, in foreign affairs than in some other committees, because that's what we do. We meet, discuss, we network, we talk more policy than legislation. So we also need to have the rooms where we can do that.
Yeah, the means to meet people who are the boots on the ground, so to say.
Yeah.
But actually, let's stay on foreign affairs. So your main committee, the AFET committee. So within the AFET committee for the EPP, you are the standing rapporteur on Iran. So you overview all the work that is being done about EU-Iran relationships. As it happens, a couple of weeks ago, the Parliament adopted a resolution on Iran to say what is the position of the Parliament regarding the latest events in Iran. We can think about the protest in the country following the killing of a young woman. So could you a bit walk us through what is the Parliament position? What is the European Parliament thinking about Iran? What are they recommending that the EU should do when it comes to Iran?
Yeah, I think that we as a Parliament have moved quite far and fast during this mandate. I had a much more trouble being heard in the beginning of the mandate than we do now. The security risk that also Iran is to us here in Europe now, which naturally became more clear to people after they started selling all these drones and rockets to Russia. It made people here more aware of the threat they can pose to us. But I mean, disinformation propaganda towards Europe and other countries is nothing new when it comes to Iran. They've been doing that for a long time. Not only towards Israel, and treating their own people in a horrible way is not new. They've been doing that for a long time as well. So the work went quite hard in the beginning, but easier and easier to getting my colleagues to understand the threat that Iran is. And with the latest resolutions, where we managed to also recommend a terrorist designation of the IRGC, and also hopefully not only to say, well, nothing is happening with the JCPOA, that's the nuclear agreement, nothing is happening with that anyway. I think that it's important to go all the way and actually suspend it, since they are both treating their own citizens in a horrible way after the protesters now, after the death of Mahsa Amini, but also really the threat that they face to all of us, not only within their own country.
Still on Iran, and you anticipated a bit what my question. That's not on you. It made sense. My question is about the nuclear deal. So the EU, I think it was in 2015, if I recall correctly, co-sponsored like a deal that was made, an international agreement that was made with Iran to stop its to put under control its nuclear program. The agreement went a bit awry, let's say, following the election of Donald Trump in the US, and then the escalation of tensions between the US and Iran and the rest of the international community, and the question of whether the deal should be relaunched has been since pending. So do you think that the EU should try to reignite this nuclear deal with Iran, or just abandon the idea and say, okay, we've been trying and now it makes no sense, Iran is doing its own thing, so let's just cut our losses?
Well, there is no possibility of us going back to the deal now at all and trying to promote it with all the horrible actions by the Iranian regime at this stage at all. But I mean, it's no coincidence that countries that are close to Iran, Israel and others, have been very suspicious and negative to the JCPOA from the beginning, the relaunch, while we in Europe were generally more positive. But I think that now we are starting to see the worries that the countries around them that really know Iran better than we do have had, which means that we need to take their opinions more into account. We're talking about a country whose goal is to annihilate another country, the state of Israel. That is their expressed goal. It's really hard to strike a deal with someone who has that goal and doesn't stay away from it.
And so then, because there's still the question of nuclear weapons in Iran, the development program that they're having. So then, what should the EU do about that? Should we just how can we try to start? How can we stop, if we can, this nuclear program? Is there a way to find a deal, or for you it's impossible to stop, and because we can't make a deal with Iran?
No. But I mean, continue with all the sanctions we can do, improve them, make them harder, reach more people, target the Revolutionary Guard. Continue to do that what we can there. Cut all the ties that we can with the shipments going from Iran to Russia and Russia to Iran. I mean, to be honest, we still also don't know how Russia is paying for all the weapons that they are getting from Iran. I mean, they are cut from all the bank systems. They don't have, the sanctions are making Russia suffer. And we also see that the Iranian economy isn't that good, because they have cut down on their funding on their own terrorist branches like Hezbollah. They are not funding them in the same way like they did before. So the economy isn't too great there either. So how are they paying? Is it with knowledge? Is it with uranium? These are things that are being discussed, I think, and should be discussed.
And so, do you, given like the internal situation of Iran with all the protests and all that, do you see there's a possibility that the regime might fall, or is it's not likely at this stage of things, even if the protests have been going strong for months?
I mean, we all hope, don't we? We all hope that this will work now, but I think that it is a mistake to see these protests as a new reaction. This is an ongoing reaction for many, many years, where each spark ignites the next level of the same protest, the same, call it revolution, if we're positive. So if not this one, the next one, or the one after, because now we have seen the protests going stronger on so many different levels all over the country. And we also saw the Iranian regime starting to say that they will make changes to the morality police, for example, and other things, which is, I don't believe it for a word, a single thing of what they're saying, but the fact that they actually go out and say that they need to change some things is a new step for the Iranian regime. And that is a signal, okay, which is important. And the unbelievable courage, for example, from the Iranian soccer team during the World Cup, refusing to sing the national anthem in support of the women of their own country. Unbelievable courage to go home after that. So we see the protests on a whole new level all across society, and that is harder for the Iranian regime to stop.
Still on foreign affairs, but this time like going away from Iran. You since you are a co-founder of the Frenchy group and with Uyghur, it's a relevant topic. It's the question of China, and one topic that is discussed a lot over the last few years is the question of the influence of China in Europe, whether it's through acquisition of companies in Germany, they're interested in some sensitive technologies, spying, cyber crimes, and all that. So, what do you think the EU should do to keep under control or stop, if possible, the influence of China, the undue influence of China in Europe?
These are large questions.
Yes.
I think it's safe to say that we have been too naive with Russia and with China. I will now we are facing the cost of being too naive with Russia, and I really do think that it's vital that we don't do the same thing with China. China has not an active plan. I seriously doubt it. Like Russia had with Ukraine and establishing, or Mr. Putin mainly, and establishing the former Great Russia. But the influence and the plan that China has in Africa, South America, Europe has been going on for many, many years. And it's not that long ago that we really had the discussion on the Chinese investment agreement, for example, and now we are more aware and more concerned. We start blocking Huawei from doing 5G networks. So now we are aware of the problem, and that is the largest, first, and most important step to make a difference.
And
yeah.
And should we, in this context, we know that the US are proponent of a very strong position against China. Do you, and the EU wants to have a bit more of a middle way? Do you think that we should go be stronger against China, a bit like the US would want, or should the EU keep its middle way of saying, okay, China could be a partner on some things, but on the other side, it's also a strategic competitor and I don't want to say adversary, but a rival, a systemic rival, I think it's the impression.
I mean, we live in a globalized world where we're all connected and in a ways dependent of each other, but we also need to stay extremely strong to our own values. I myself have a Jewish heritage. Many of my family were on my father's side were killed in the Holocaust. And now we see that the same thing is happening again with the Uyghurs. And if we say never again, we need to mean it and also act with it. So more conditionality on our trade, more demands, because China is also dependent of trade. And one factor that is extremely important, and that is to, again, make the transatlantic link stronger. The connection and cooperation between the European Union, the Europe, and the US. We need to work more hand in hand and not trying to run the show by ourselves, not from our perspective and not from the US perspective. Because when we work together, we do greater things. Mm-hmm. There was an old African proverb that I liked that they said that if you want to go fast, run alone. If you want to go far, go together. And right now, we need to continue the teamwork that we really have with the US and rebuild it after a few rough years.
You spoke of naivety, like a past naivety of the EU towards Russia, and that we should not do it again with China. One country that has been particularly criticized for this naivety has been Germany. Germany has hooked itself to Russia in the past, and we know that they are very tempted to do, and have been doing so with China as well. So do you think that it's indeed a mistake, and that Germany has been going a bit too close to China over the past few years? And do you see like a change a bit in the approach to China when you discuss with your German colleague in the EPP and beyond?
I think many of us made many mistakes. I don't want to single out one country or one party in this. I mean, we all did. My former government went to Iran wearing veils. I mean, many of us did many mistakes with these regimes that we should never do again. So we can look backwards and say that, talk about all the mistakes, or we can make sure that we learn from them and get better. And with Russia, we definitely have. We have been so united in the European Union. That is important that we continue to be. But also, I see a much more unity when it comes to the threat that Iran is making, and now also in a different perspective still to us, China. But I mean, what is different perspective to us is not to Taiwan, mm-hmm. who suffer the same worry and concern every day that Ukraine has been facing before the invasion.
And speaking of Ukraine, let's switch a bit to Ukraine. I'm sorry, I'm changing continents back and forth, but yeah.
Yes, I try to follow.
Now let's go back. Let's go to Ukraine. Ukraine is of course in the middle of a war. EU is supporting it in its conflict against Russia. There's going to be a EU-Ukraine summit in the days to come in Kyiv, and one point that Ukraine is pushing forward is to try to join the EU by 2026. That's the objective that they are saying that they want to fulfill. Do you think that it is even remotely possible and realistic for Ukraine to join the EU by 2026 or within the next 2 years?
It would be, I mean, the speed until now has been record-breaking still. So we have moved really fast, but also I think that candidate status is important. I really want to see Ukraine as a full worthy member of the European Union, but also we need to make sure that they also fulfill the obligations that we have when it comes to rule of law, when it comes to corruption, when it comes to NGOs, freedom of press. I mean, all these things all the demands that we have on other candidates, we need to have the same on Ukraine when it comes to becoming a full member of the European Union. So really, if it would work until 2026, it would be up to them.
Okay.
But it would take a tremendous amount of work, especially at the same time as you're fighting a war. Maybe not longer for your survival, but as you did in the beginning, but you're really fighting a war with an enemy that has no intention of losing or retiring their army. So I think it would be extremely hard. I really think it's vital we don't compromise with our conditions.
And so of course, there's also the matter of the war itself. I think it's pretty safe to say that it's unlikely that Ukraine could join the EU while the war is still ongoing. I think it's pretty fair, safe to say. But beyond that, so we've seen over the past couple of weeks the support in terms of weapon increase. Now Ukraine is going to receive tanks. Now there's discussion whether they should receive jet fighters. How far should the EU go in support of Ukraine? Whether we're talking about military equipment and non-military equipment in terms of legislation, there are discussions about opening the single market to them. So how far should the EU go? Can the EU go safely? Let's say.
Well, safely is not a word anymore. They're fighting for our freedom, so we should go far, extremely far in helping them. It's really important that we do that. I mean, look at even Sweden is sending weapons for the first time. Who would have thought that 2 years ago? That a country that has been acting as neutral for so many years send weapons into a war. They are fighting for us, and Europe knows it. And we are extremely thankful to have them and extremely inspired by them, but we need to help them so much as we possibly can.
Ukraine has been very active since the beginning of the conflict to try to isolate Russia in the international arena. And something that they've been asking lately is to try to have the Russian athletes banned from the future Olympic Games that will take place in Paris. As a former Paralympic athlete yourself, what do you think of that? Is it a good idea to ban Russian athletes from the Olympics, or should politics stay out of the Olympic Games?
In a perfect world, politics would stay out of the Olympic Games, but sports are political. Even Hitler used the Olympics to reach his own goals in 1936. So there's no thing to say that the sports are not political, because sports washing has been happening for so many years, and that's the only reason why Qatar is interested in it. So sports make a difference. I have been critical because a few years ago, I was very critical when we talked about banning Belarusian athletes when we applauded North Korean athletes. when North Korea entered the opening ceremony in Pyeongchang, everyone stood up and applauded. And then they talked about banning Belarus. For me, we need to have the same line for each country. And I think that countries who are suffering under a horrible regime should be allowed to participate in games. But there is a big difference with Russia, because the Russian regime, Putin, invaded another democratic country. And so many million people are suffering right now due to his actions. So I absolutely support the banning of Russian athletes until there's peace.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I mean, we want Iranian athletes to come to games. We want North Korean athletes to come to games because we want to show them a democratic world. We want them to come. We want them to go home and talk about their experience in a democratic country where freedom of thought is natural, freedom of speech and thought, even when it comes to North Korea, is absolute.
Mm-hmm. And
so, but we don't want Iran to host an Olympic Games.
Indeed.
That's where so absolutely banning Russia and Belarus now, because they are actively killing or trying to kill so many people, and their goal is to annihilate another country, Ukraine.
So if I summarize a bit for you, so in principle, everyone should be welcome in the European Games, including non-democratic countries. Take North Korea, take Iran. But from the moment they break international law by invading another country, in this context, Russia, here they're crossing a red line. They should be put aside until the war is stopped, until they stop the invasion.
They are at war based on their single aggression.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Let's move on again. This time in your work in your parliament. So, like I mentioned in the introduction, you're a member of the Disability Intergroup, which gather MEPs who are interested in policies towards the people with disabilities. So, can you explain a bit what can the EU do in the field of policies towards the disabled people, and what should it do? What more should it do in the future?
This is quite hard, because you always expect every politician when it comes to this to say, we need to do a lot more and have the same system for each country. I don't think so. Unfortunately, I think that this needs to be a national competence, and we need to keep that on a national level, because we have reached so differently that it's hard to find a good balance right now. The difference look at some of our candidate countries, and even some of our member states still have institutions for people with disabilities, while other countries like my own have the personal assistance, living your own life, having people employed by the government, helping you not only to survive, but to live. Thanks to the system in Sweden, I can be a father, a husband of a father of my 2-year-old daughter, and a husband. I can work as a member of the European Parliament, and the government will support me with the physical aid I need to do that and to live my life.
And so for you, the EU has no role?
No, what we need to do is create severe and strong minimum levels, but not finding a medium level that should apply to all membership countries. Because I don't want all these countries to have an influence on the Swedish legislation.
Okay, so you're
because we have reached so far, and now I'm being very blunt. We need to help people all over Europe, and we need to raise the level one step at a time. But to go from institutions to full, you need to also first have group homes, you need to have housing, you need to have help, you need to go to school, you need to go to universities, you need help to get out, you need help with wheelchairs, and then you can talk about the next step. In a perfect world, and that's why I'm an EPP, I think, the party, because I don't believe in a utopia. I don't believe we are there yet. If we try to make a legislation and put all the level all the disability laws into Brussels and Strasbourg and say that these should affect all people with disabilities all over Europe tomorrow, the risk is that the level will be too low for many and too high for others.
So I understand that you're saying that not all laws about to help disabled people should be centralized at EU level, but are there still things that the EU could do? Like in the past, the EU has done things. I can think like I think it was a few years ago, the EU adopted an Accessibility Act to ensure that
exactly.
a number of devices are accessible to people with various disabilities. So are there other areas that are not, let's say, not going too far, but that where the EU would be relevant to raise the level for everyone?
Accessibility is one thing. Being able to work in another member country is one thing if you have the system at home. But also, one example, just to problematize, there is a suggestion now with a disability card that every person with a severe disability in the European Union should have a disability card, which allows them to ride buses for free everywhere, parking for free, a lot of things for free, which is extremely important in some countries. But I should pay. I have a job. I make money. And many other people with disabilities like me have jobs and make money. I think that it's wrong to say that everyone with a disability should get things for free because they're in a wheelchair, because what you say is that people with wheelchairs can't get jobs.
Okay, interesting.
Even if you don't mean it.
Interesting.
If that made my point clearer.
No, that makes sense. I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
That's why I'm worried. I'm worried that we, in an act of kindness, create other problems.
So it's a. I don't say to minimize the disabled people. It's just that it implies that they're not able to do things. They can't be independent while they can, and so there's no reason they should be treated differently. If I understand.
Yes, in a way. Yes.
In a way, yeah. It's
in a way. I mean, I pay taxes like everyone else who have a job. We should find support systems for those who need them. We should really do more to help the people who need help in our union, but we shouldn't take for granted just because you have a disability, you need help with everything. Let's try to be more individual and try to help where help is needed. Because the funny thing is that when I do get help with the things I need, like when I get help from my personal assistant to put my suit and shirt on, I can work as an MEP.
Mm-hmm.
And the even funnier thing is that when I get the help I need with my disability becomes less important. It doesn't take up all of my identity. And I keep forgetting that I'm disabled because I don't have to remember it, because I'm not worried about not surviving.
And speaking of that, so you're coming from Sweden, which has a pretty advanced system of support for people with disability. But then, as an EP, you spend a lot of time in Belgium, you spend a lot of time in France, who have different levels of support or non-support for disabled people. So how do you see, like, as a person with a disability yourself, how far do you see like the differences when you're leaving from Sweden, going to Brussels for a week, and then going for 1 week in Paris, in Strasbourg? Do you feel like a stark difference, and could say, okay, here there should be something that being done, or for you it's not invisible, but it's.
Yes. There is a difference in accessibility and other things, and that's also why I worry, because in some countries there are many countries who have reached further than other countries in without naming and shaming. Mm-hmm. But that might also be taken as an excuse for countries who have invested more money and reached further, that we don't have to go this far because we're following the EU rules. So we have to be a bit careful here as well, so that we are not creating more problems than we are trying to solve. And there must be a way to help countries reach further without risking the level of independence that people have in other countries.
Okay, interesting perspective. I see in the chat people didn't think about the perspective that you're saying. So yeah, that's a good point. That's an interesting perspective. So yeah, that's interesting.
That's the fun thing with live shows. You actually have a time to finish. That's
exactly
why I really liked your show.
Perfect. I'm happy that you enjoy it. Let's change again a bit topic because I'm looking at time and we have I don't want to keep you too long either. Sweden, your country, is currently holding the presidency of the council until June. So, what are the top priorities of the Swedish presidency? The things that Sweden could really, let's say, help the EU move forward on, or put the priorities on from your point of view?
Well, I think it's safe to say that most of our actions will be towards the situation in Ukraine, in Russia, keeping the union together and continuing to give the support that we can, while also making sure that we become less independent from countries outside Europe.
Okay. And have you...
It's hard to do something else at this stage in the world, I think, at this time. We are at a serious risk geopolitically with the threat from Russia. So to continue that would be extremely important.
And beyond Ukraine, someone in the chat is underlining that, and there is discussion in Brussels right now. It's about migration reform, migration policy. We know that it's a bigger topic of concern in Sweden over the past few months. Do you see it likely that there would be progress on a EU migration reform under the Swedish presidency, or given the level of difficulty within the council, the other priorities, we're thinking of Ukraine, it's unlikely that a lot of things could be done within the next 6 months?
Yes, I think so, and I hope so. I think it's important to continue that work. And I mean, a lot of work has been done by the Swedish Commissioner, Ylva Johansson, in this perspective. And together now with our government and the Swedish presidency, I hope that we can reach further. But it's not my committee, so I don't work with it that close.
No, of course. But still, there are general debates, let's say, without going into the details. I mean, we know that the current debate is whether the EU should finance fences for the borders between at the Bulgarian border, the Austrian border. So do you think that EU money should be used to finance fence, or do you think that it would not be proper to do so?
I think we need to finance fences at this stage.
Okay.
I think we do, yes. The world has changed, and using migrants as a weapon has been a horrible action by
Belarus.
Yeah. So we need to also do it to help people from those horrible fates.
Mm-hmm. Last question, well, not last question, last question, but a question that is a bit more political and that relates more to the internal works of EU politics. There's a lot of rumors over the past few weeks that there could be a potential alliance between the EPP and the ECR, so the conservatives, the Conservative Party that is a bit further on the right than the EPP. So that it would be an alliance between the EPP and the ECR for the next EU election, bearing in mind the alliance that already exists in Italy, for instance, that exists to an extent in Sweden. So do you think that it's a possible scenario, such an alliance? Do you support it? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, we do have a cooperation with one ECR party in Sweden to form the government. And the solution there is that they're not in government, but we are running, and they support it. And we are in agreement on different subjects. And naturally, we could reach agreements with many parties on many different subjects. ECR is one of them that we many times stand very close and sometimes don't stand close at all, which is what politics is about. So I think that we can continue to cooperate more with many parties, ECR included. And naturally, we have more ties and connections with ECR than we have with the Greens, for example.
Mm-hmm. But should that be like a formal alliance? Like, so, like for instance, the Italians are pushing very hard.
I don't see that happening now.
Okay, especially since like we know that in the EPP there is a particular delegation. I'm thinking of the Polish delegation that is not very keen on such an alliance because their ECR counterpart, the Law and Justice Party, is pretty much their arch enemy. They have elections in October, I believe. So, but for you, like, it's unlikely that an actual alliance would be possible for the next EU election.
We'll see where the discussion ends, but I mean, cooperation is one thing, alliance is another. And definitely in the Foreign Affairs Committee, we have worked well with many of our colleagues in ECR, but also many of our colleagues in Renew and S&D to some extent. So I think that unity is good where there is ground for it. But we shouldn't have unity for the sake of unity. We should have unity when we share ideology, when we share values, when we share principles.
Okay, interesting. Pretty clear. If we talk, there's been a lot of talks over the past few years about a potential reform of the EU, about changing a bit the EU to make it work a bit better. I'm thinking about the Conference on the Future of Europe, which the Council is trying very hard to bury. If you could change anything, you decide to change whatever you want, and it happens. You don't have to worry about the Council. You don't have to worry about the majority. Put aside all these things. You live in a perfect world where you can change the EU however you want. What do you change and why?
Easy last question. Now, I think that for me, I would bring back the European Union to its core purpose, trade and peace, and focus maximum energy on trade, peace, and environment, and less on things like the social pillar, for example, where I think it should be run by national competence instead.
So for you, on this topic, it should be the competence should be sent back to the member state. Whatever the little competence that the EU has should be sent back.
Exactly. So we should work more with trade, more with a free movement, more with being a world actor when it comes to foreign policies, where we together can make a difference. I mean, we keep forgetting that the European Union started as a peace project after the ruins of World War II, where we realized that countries who trade and understand each other don't fight. Go back more to that, find that purpose, the things that united us.
And this time, the very final question for you, and then we conclude. And I think I could guess your answer, but I will ask it anyway. Where do you stand on the debate about a potential federal European Union? Are you in favor? Are you against? Are you on the fence? What do you think?
I think you heard pretty clear that I'm against after the last question. Yeah.
I want you to make sure.
I don't think we will ever be the United States of Europe. I don't think that is what we should strive to be. We should do the things we do best on a national level. That doesn't mean I'm really a friend of Europe and our shared values and ideology, but we also need to focus our attention to that and those perspectives.
I promise it was my last question, but I have a pretty interesting question in chat. Do you have time? Do you have 2 minutes to cover this last one or not?
Okay, yes.
All right. So there's some EPP members that have been critical of the alliances or the coalition agreement that have been popping up in Italy, in Sweden, with some parties that they consider to be on the far right. Do you see a potential rift forming in the EPP due to this cooperation, to the idea of cooperating with far right parties in other countries as well? Or do you think that there is still the EPP is still united, even if there are difference of perspective on the matter?
Yes, and I don't see a rift, but also it's quite dangerous when we start generalizing of far-right parties, because it looks very different in different countries, how far they go and in what way. So it's a general question that is hard to answer generally.
Well, I mean, if we take the Italian example, we had parties that were pretty well identified on the far right. If we're thinking about the Lega, if we're thinking about Fratelli d'Italia, and yet Forza Italia has been EPP member, has been very keen on doing this alliance with them. So, for you, is that are they far right government, and is it right that EPP parties go into formal alliance with actual far right parties, or not, or it should not be a taboo?
I think that we need to talk to and address and discuss with almost every party, as long as we stay true to our own values and what we believe in. We tried in Sweden to isolate our right party. I was one of them who for many years said that we shouldn't talk to or negotiate with the Swedish Democrats. They're not as far right as they are in Italy. But after so many years of ignoring and not talking to them, I have also admitted that I was wrong, that we need to discuss with them, we need to debate, we need to actually see and fight them in another way, and also agree where we can agree on some issues.
All right, that's pretty clear.
But I think this is important. Sorry for...
No, go ahead.
But I think that if you are true or confident in your own values, you can safely talk to and negotiate with everyone. So it's a matter of that, mainly for me. So I changed my mind in that myself a few years ago in this perspective.
Okay.
The only thing that happened when we ignored them was that they grew exponentially.
Interesting. All right. That was my final question. So thank you very much, David Lega, for taking the time to answer our questions tonight. We went continent from continent, topic from topic, so it was very interesting. Chat, make sure to thank him for his time. You can follow him on Twitter. You have it's just that under his video feed. Mr. Lega, I hope that you enjoyed the interview.
I did.
That's perfect. And yeah, I wish you a very good evening. Thank you again. Chat, stay with me. We're gonna do the debriefing. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, chat. Let's start the debriefing. Tell me everything where I'll take my notes and we discuss everything. Up. I'm closing Zoom. Bim bam boom. All right. Let's start this debriefing. I'm closing stuff. All right. I'm all yours. So, we discussed a lot of topics. And again, I'm happy. 70 MEP. 10% of the parliament on the channel. I'm happy. Sorry about self-congratulation, but yeah, I mean, I was looking for that number for a long time, so good thing that we reached it. Anyway, back on topic. So we discussed for quite some time about the Qatar Gate, which makes sense. Yeah, Mr. Lega was the first MEP that we received since the scandal broke out. We talked about lobbying. We talked about the limits of putting transparency. Putting transparency. No, that there need to be transparency rules, but how far you have to go. It's a bit more nuanced about that, because in this case, and that was a good point. Given that he works on foreign affairs, a lot on human rights and all this thing. I'm just moving a bit aside my camera, that way I won't block part of the chat. There we go. He doesn't want to necessarily disclose exactly who he's been meeting when he's meeting an activist from Hong Kong or from other countries that are not democracies, because that could put them into danger, which is a fair point. Then you can think about other cases when it might be not necessarily not relevant to publish the meeting. You have these cases indeed of human rights. You have discussions about should MEPs meet or not people who are not organizations that are not on the transparency register. So the transparency register is this register where lobbies give information about who they are, what they are lobbying about, what are their budget, etc., etc. And then they are allowed to go into the parliament. They can meet commissioners as well, etc. And there are discussions about whether MEP should be allowed to meet anyone who is not on the transparency register. And here there are arguments to be made that it would not be good because it's not necessary for everyone to necessarily be. You can have good reason not to be on the transparency register. Like for instance, if you are an organization that simply never set foot in Brussels, like maybe you do it once in 5-10 years or whatever, you're not going to put an entry, you're not going to register in the transparency register of the EU because you're never going to set foot there, or maybe once because you have one file, or because for whatever reason you have to go there. So it makes sense then that you're not in there. That doesn't mean that you're trying to hide stuff or whatever. So all that to say that it's not everything is necessarily black and white. You have to put you have to be reasonable to an extent that there can be good reason not to be in a transparency register, to not want to record the meeting or to give the identity of people, etc., etc. We mentioned a bit the immunity rules. So for those of you who don't know, MEPs, and that's the same in your national parliament, MEPs and MP have a legal immunity to protect them. So that means that the MEPs cannot be condemned, they cannot be arrested for what they say or what they vote in the European Parliament. And likewise, your national member of parliament cannot be put in jail for things that they have voted or they have said in your parliament. Why is that? So that's an immunity. Why is that? It's to ensure that they are free to act as they see fit. Because, and he said it like, if you are a member of the opposition, you want to be able to denounce what potentially the government is doing without fearing potential retaliation. And so that's why these immunities are there. And MEPs have the same system. But these immunities are not absolute. They can be lifted. And they don't cover... they only cover things as far as the mandate is concerned. Meaning that if you do a crime, let's say, I don't know, you murder someone, this murder obviously has nothing to do with you being an MEP. You just murdered someone, and so your immunity can be lifted so that the justice can then do its work, and that potentially the person gets condemned. Likewise, so for instance in Qatargate, you have a clear crime, which is corruption, and so MEPs, the parliament, can lift the immunity of the MEPs concerned, so that the justice and police can act and do things. But only the parliament could lift the immunity, and for that you have a procedure where they examine the facts and whether or not it relates to the parliament, to the work in parliament, and then they have a vote. They have to have a vote on that. The only exception so you always need a formal lifting of the immunity in the parliament, which takes not that much time, depending on the urgency, etc. Like in the case of Qatargate right now, they're lifting immunities of MEPs involved, and the requests have been placed, I think, in either end of December or beginning of January. So it's going to be approved like in February, likely, or something like that. So it takes a month and a half if it's an emergency. In the case of Eva Kaili is the MEP, the former vice president of the parliament, who was pretty much caught doing this, being involved in the corruption. She could not claim her immunity because she was caught in a way, in French we call that in flagrant délit. She was caught red-handed. So the police had reasons to believe on the spot. So I think in this case they had a phone tapped, and they listened to her, like give instruction to move money away from take it away from the country. So they considered that it was a proof that a crime was ongoing, and so they arrested her, and they could arrest her because her immunity could not work in this case. So that's one of the exceptions to this. Wait, 10% of this parliament, or some of them were from before 2019? No, 10% of this parliament. I only did Twitch. I only started a couple of years ago, so everything is from Parliament 2019. It's not from before. So no, it's 10% of the 70 MEPs since I started, and I started in January 2021. So I might have been just 2 years. 2 years. What else are you saying? It was weird when he mentioned EPP walking out of some of the meetings where they felt it was unprofessional. Should there not be an internal process for them to call out such meetings? Yes, there are meetings such as these, like coordinators meetings, bureau meetings, where they can protest, but then ultimately decisions are taken at the majority. So if the majority of the other groups thinks that no, it's fine, then the things go forward, and then the ultimate things that they can do is to walk out to show that they disagree with the decision that has been made. But there are indeed internal process, internal decision making to that, where they most likely express their view and try to prevent it from happening. They didn't have the majority, they found themselves in minority, and so yeah, that ultimately it was a show of disagreement that they made. What else did we talk about? Friendship groups and delegations. So again, on Qatargate, what are friendship groups? What are delegations? Delegations are official bodies of the parliament. It's official. They are. You can find it on the any MEP's profile on the parliament. It's a body that is dedicated to the relations between the European Parliament and the parliament of another country, another area. So it's interparliamentary diplomacy, so to say. So, for instance, you have a delegation for the relation with with Canada, and so you will have MEPs that are in this delegation. They meet people from Canada, from the Canadian Parliament. They can go visit there to discuss EU-Canada relations, etc. You have a delegation for countries of the Maghreb, a delegation for Southeast Asia, for I don't think it's Mercosur. I mean, some of the Southern American countries are bundled together. You have a delegation for countries from Eastern Europe and Central Asia to an extent, etc., etc. These bodies are official. And then you have friendship groups. Friendship groups are non-official. They are purely informal groups, but they exist. It's groups of MEPs who say, okay, we all have a common thing that interests us, and so we're going to gather informally, it's not an official body, and we're going to work together, we discuss together about this topic. So, for instance, you have friendship groups. In this case, David Lega is a co-founder of the friendship group with about Uyghur. So it's the MEPs who are interested in the situation around Uyghur. So Uyghur are this ethnic group in Xinjiang, one region of China. They tend to be Muslim, and they are victims of a lot of discrimination. They are put in for forced labor, forced sterilization, concentration camps. So he qualified that as a genocide, and so you have groups of MEPs that are worried about this, and so they have these friendship groups where they discuss this. They will meet people, they will meet Uyghur people who represent them to try to raise awareness about that, and so this is one way for them to coordinate. So here you have friendship groups that are about foreign affairs, but you also have friendship groups about, it can be a friendship group about anything. You have a friendship groups about culture, like creative industries, etc. So you have a group of MEPs who are interested in culture and creative industries, and so they gather and they work around this topic, and it's a way for them to coordinate and to raise the awareness in the parliament about that. But all these groups are informal. They're not formally recognized by the parliament. They don't have funds from the parliament to finance their things. So it's either they can be either the MEPs themselves who are paying partly for the thing. It can be partly external actors that are co-financing the thing, etc., etc. And so one issue with these friendship groups is that since it's very informal, you don't necessarily know what's going on with them, who is paying for them, what's what's going on necessarily. And so it was accused of being a potential vehicle for undue influence. And in the case of Qatargate, there were worries, and I think there was one as well, a similar scandal around China a few months, couple of years ago, I think. I'm not entirely certain, but there was another country where there was like a friendship group that had to be dissolved because some things were not were a bit weird in there. You didn't know really who was financing what, whether it was like a tool for actually lobbying MEPs and unduly influence them, etc. And so since Qatargate, there is a push to ban these friendship groups because they are not formal. They can be like he said, in some cases they work in a parallel way to delegation, which are official body, and so they could like work counter to the delegation or sometimes that is complementary. So there is this potential competition between the two, and that can be a bad thing. Then again, in this case, look at my case. I'm a co-founder of the friendship group for Uyghur. It's an important cause. It's not replacing the work that is being done in any delegation. On the contrary, it's about raising awareness about a terrible situation. So these groups should not be banned, but other groups might be banned. Like he didn't mention it, but you could think about, for instance, a friendship group about. I don't know if there is one. I think there is one, but I'm not certain. Like about friendship groups of countries of the Arabic Peninsula, including Qatar, which could be a vehicle for Qatari influence, but not only in the Arabic Peninsula. You have other countries that would be also interested in influencing the parliament. So all that to say that this is something where there could be a loophole in terms of transparency and all that, but not everything, according to it, should be banned because they could be useful as well, and there could be pretty legitimate work being done in there. Then what did we talk about? We talked for quite a while about Iran, the situation there, the fact that the EU might have proved a bit too naive in the past about it, and that it should have now it's waking up a bit to it, and that it should not fall back to giving it too easy to Iran, should listen more to Israel. Israel has been extremely critical of any cooling down of on the I would say the contrary of any warming up of the relationship with between the EU and Iran. They've been very critical of the EU. It's not a EU deal, but the international agreement that was co-negotiated with the EU, including the US and it was who was there as well? Canada as well? I'm not sure. But yeah, this agreement with Iran to put a stop and put under control their nuclear program. So yeah, he's saying things are bad now, and the EU should not be naive and should put sanctions to increase the pressure on the government. And we can see that sanctions are actually working. The economy is not doing well in the country. Iran is supporting less and less. Is not able to support as much as he used to countries movement like the Hezbollah, etc., etc. And in the recent resolution, so the parliament took a position on Iran a couple of weeks ago. They said that they were calling the council to include the Guardians of the Revolution, which is like a paramilitary group of in Iran, very, very, very powerful. It's borderline the state within the state, and so they want the EU to include this very powerful Iranian body on the list of organizations that are considered to be terrorist by the EU. Then we talk about China. Same story. The EU should not be naive about China, like it was naive with Russia. Even if when it comes to China, there is a difference to be. You can't make a pure parallel between China and Russia, because while Russia had an agenda for the EU, an aggressive agenda, China does not necessarily have directly such an offensive agenda towards the EU, even if you could argue that there is definitely a push from China to meddle with things in Europe. We see right now, we've seen last year China putting sanctions against Lithuania because they dared to open a representation office of Taiwan. We will see in the weeks to come what happens with Czech Republic, because the newly elected president of Czech Republic, one of the first call he made after his election was to Taiwan, and he promised, which no other EU leader had done in the past, and he promised that he would go to Taiwan and he would meet personally the president of Taiwan, which is of course a huge red flag for Taiwan, for China, who doesn't want anyone meeting Taiwanese official. And so it's going to be interesting to see how badly they react to that, and what kind of sanctions they're going to, and what kind of pressure they're going to put on the Czech Republic and indirectly the EU to try to keep things under control. Interesting points, that discussion that we had on sports and disabilities, like on sports, and the fact that sports is political. It was funny that he said that, because in France we had a debate at the time of the World Cup in Qatar on whether sport was a political affair. And said no, sports has always been there's always been politics in sports. That's how it is. And in the case of Russia, politics should be part of the equation. And given that Russia is waging a war illegally, in a war of aggression against Ukraine, it should not be allowed to compete in the Olympics. Contrary, and I know that Andreas, you were not convinced by that, but he was making the parallel with North Korea. I said, yeah, North Korea, sure, they're not a democracy, but it's important that they participate, so that the athlete can see what is a democracy, what's happening there, and that they can maybe spread the word internally. And North Korea has not started, despite being a dictatorship, they have not started a war recently, so they should be allowed to be there. Russia, on the contrary, broke international law. They started actively war, and so they should be sanctioned for it. They should not be tolerated there. Olympics were always meant to bring people together, and even wars stop for their duration. Excluding sportsmen who just want to prove their best is going too far, in your opinion? Wars stopped for the duration. It's true. That's not the case anymore. Again, back then, wars were something that was very formal, and World War II did not stop for the Olympics. So times have changed. The war is less formal than it used to be. And again, yes, Olympics are about bringing people together. It's about the ideal of peace, etc., etc. But it's still a political tool. And so he mentioned Hitler. Hitler used the Olympic Games in Germany in 1936 to his advantage. There's been a lot of politics in the various Olympic Games in the US and in Russia, in the Soviet Union back during the Cold War. So sure, but then it's not about excluding sportsmen who just want to prove their best. It's about, do you tolerate a country that is actively showing that it doesn't abide by the ideal of the Olympics, and that is breaking actively international law, giving them the opportunity to gain international fame through the Olympics and do as if everything was going normally. So it's a fair debate. It's a fair debate. So. Yeah, I mean, everyone will have his opinion on this, but in the context, the differentiation is indeed that if we followed that logic, USA should have been excluded from most Olympics. Not necessarily. In many cases, they were acting under mandates. Under international authorization, you might make an argument that in the case of Iraq, that was not the case. But still, in many cases, the US had the backing either of the UN, there was an intervention, or NATO that with the backing of the UN, etc., etc. So not necessarily so clear cut. What else did we discuss? Disability. Pretty interesting perspective that he had on the matter. It's true that we the way he's saying it is that if you so there's two things. One that is pretty Nordic way of saying things, which is if we do things at EU level, we're going to drive down the standards that we have in Sweden, which is, for instance, something that we have heard as well when there were discussions about the EU minimum wage. When I say EU minimum wage, I put it under air quote. Why? Because there is, I think it's a directive, I think it's a directive that says that there should be, every country in the EU should have a minimum wage, but it doesn't say the minimum wage should be 1,500 euro, 800 euro. It's just say countries should have a minimum wage that allows, that is decent, etc., etc. And so a lot during these debates, you had on the one end many Eastern European countries who were against it, saying, if there is a EU a mandatory minimum wage, that's going to, of course, be higher than what we have currently in our countries, and that's going to be a competitive disadvantage versus the Western countries that are richer, that have more qualifications, so that's going to be bad for us. And on the other end, you had the Nordic countries, some of the Nordic countries who were opposed to it, either because they had different systems. Like, for instance, I think it's in Denmark, where they don't have a legal minimum wage, so minimum wage that is set by law, but they have a minimum wage that is negotiated with trade unions. They have a very high level of trade unions there, and so you have collective agreement that de facto sets a minimum wage. And so they were afraid that any EU law about that would mess up the system that was working well, that is working them well in the perspective. And then you have other countries, also in the north, who were saying, if there is a EU law about minimum wage, given that we are among the most advanced on this matter, the law is going to be less good than what we have, and so it's going to push us down. It's going to be it's going to push us on something that is less good than what we have. So you could find that perspective a bit when you in what you were saying about disability. Well, not disability rules, but services that are made towards the people with disabilities. And where in Sweden we have a very high level of support. If we add a EU law, that would be it would have to be lower than what we have, and so that would not be good. So pretty Nordic point of view there. Then there was the whole discussion on if you put a mandatory idea that everything should be free for disabled people, like for instance transportation, free car spots, etc., etc. It means that it could imply that disabled people are not normal contributing member of society, that we disabled people cannot work and so are not able to pay for the bus card or whatever, and so we have to have something for free, and so that is discriminating a bit for us. Just joining, but won't it be minimum harmonization? You mean about minimum wage? Yeah, it would be indeed like probably a minimum harmonization. But the point that he was making on disability was about some discussion about creating a card for the EU-wide card for disabled people that all disabled people in the EU would have, and they would have in all countries free car space. They would have free public transport, etc., etc. And so for him, that implies that the disabled people cannot be contributing members of society, that they can't pay they can't pay their bus card like the other, and so that they're not people like the other. But minimum harmonization. You could make indeed an argument that it could be minimum harmonization, and that would be indeed a fair point. Saying what we call minimum harmonization is that you don't say the rule must be exactly the same in all countries. You say in all countries, at the minimum, you must have that. And then if you want to go beyond that, you can. And the opposite of that is maximum harmonization, where you say whatever happens, all countries must have this same rule. It can't be more, it can't be less. It has to be this rule exactly. So, of course, if you have minimum harmonization, that leaves marginal maneuvers for countries to do more if they want, or be more stringent, etc. etc. Usually, to give a translation, if you hear directive tend to be minimum harmonization, meaning that it sets the basis, and then you can potentially go above. It's not always the case, but as a rule of thumb, directives tend to be minimum harmonization. Regulation, maximum harmonization, meaning that all the rules must be the same across the EU. So directive, minimum, regulation, maximum. That's the rule of thumb. But yeah, pretty interesting discussion and point that he made there. Even if he said, yeah, all these things should be left at national level. So it links a bit back to what he said later, saying the EU should stay away from anything related to the social pillar. Everything that is social policy should be left to member state, and the EU should not have any competence in this. Which is, I guess, an unpopular opinion for many in the parliament. Even within the EPP, you would have people would say that no, that the EU must have a social pillar and all that. What else did we discuss? Looking at the time. Okay, I can stay a bit. Another topic that's more political this time, it's about the discussion about the potential alliance between the EPP, so the party where it comes from, center-right, and the ECR, conservative / ultra-conservative / borderline far-right. And so the potential of an alliance between the two for 2024, so for the next EU elections. And here what he was saying, and again that linked back to the next topic of discussion, was that yes, you could have a collaboration, you could have discussion with the ECR, and it currently happens. It's in the everyday work in the parliament. The EPP and the ECR are talking on a daily basis to potentially find compromises on something, because they think similar things, and on other things they don't think the same, so they don't cooperate. So he says, yeah, it's one thing to cooperate with the ECR on certain topics, but an actual alliance, not so much. He doesn't think that's possible, or that's not possible, because they don't they don't think the same thing, they don't have the same values on a number of topics. Plus, internally, some delegations are not likely to be friends with their ECR counterparts. For instance, the Polish don't want to be friends with the ECR. The Polish ECR, they literally hate each other, so not likely for them to be into an alliance. So for him, the chance, it's a bit overblown, the chance of an actual alliance between the EPP and the ECR for the next election. Which links then to the final thing that we discussed. I think he hit the nails on the head with, if you have confidence in your values, you should not be afraid to engage with the far right. Well, then that's the final topic we discussed, was should you discuss to an extent with far right parties? And what was interesting there is that he said that he changed his mind, actually. He said, yeah, initially, I was against any kind of discussion between my party and the Swedish Democrats. So he says it's a conservative, not as far right as, for instance, Lega or Fratelli d'Italia in Italy. But still, he said, yeah, no, I didn't want to engage with them. I thought it was wrong, and we should not have any kind of discussion. He said, yeah, I changed my mind because, and now I think that we should be able to discuss with them, even if it's to disagree with things. And we should. He said, yeah, the only thing that we achieved by not talking to them is that we made them stronger, and they kept progressing. And that's one of the discussion indeed around the idea of the cordon sanitaire. So the cordon sanitaire is this practice of isolating the far right. So it's an agreement, an informal agreement between, let's say, the pro-European groups in the parliament to isolate the far right in the parliament to prevent them from having a particular position, not negotiating with them, etc., etc. And there's been a lot of discussion on whether this, particularly on the right within EPP, on whether this cordon sanitaire should be maintained and to what extent. Is it a taboo to talk to ultra-conservative or potentially far-right groups if you happen to agree on something on substance? And so that's the whole thing about what they say. If you're confident in your values, you should not be afraid to engage the far-right. Yes, you can make this argument, but then the other things that the counter-argument to that is that if you agree to talk, to negotiate with the far right, you normalize them. You are implying that they are a party just like the other, that there is no difference between any other democratic party and the far right. While the whole idea of the cordon sanitaire is to say the far right is not a party like the other. It's a party that is. Those are parties that are dangerous for democracy, and we should not engage with them. And so, discussing with them, potentially have agreement with them, is A, saying that they are a party like the other, and two, it's giving them legitimacy. And so normalizing their idea, because even if they can say, yeah, of course we stay strong on our value, by discussing with them, there is a back and forth, and there is a risk. There is a risk that rather than the center influencing the far right and taking them away from the extremist idea, you could have the contrary, the far right that is pulling further to the right, the center right parties. And so that in the end, it's actually dangerous because you reinforce the far right rather than weakening it. If talking about actual Nazi or anti-Semites, sure, but too many actual conservative parties are labeled far right by liberals just because they are too far from their viewpoints. Yeah, well, probably I would say is that many far right parties in Europe have roots into Nazis, anti-Semites, and all that. They claim otherwise. I mean, in France, the Rassemblement National, so the far right party, they were created by actual pro-Nazi collaborators, people. So even if today all the far right say, no, we're not Nazi, we're not anti-Semite, they have roots in there. The roots, they trace back to people who were pro-Nazi, who were racist people, xenophobic people, etc., etc. So I wouldn't say that there is nothing wrong with the far right, and only like the most batshit crazy people should not be talked to. It's not like the Conservative Party being labeled far right. It's not just the liberal giving a far right label. And some leftist parties have roots in communist movement, which is also problematic. Yeah, that's true, and they are criticized. For it. I mean, for the one difference is that for the wide majority of these communist parties, many of them in the 70s and the 80s, when let's say what was happening in Soviet Union was becoming pretty well known, they made their separation. They say, okay, we break away with the Soviet Union practice, with Stalinism, etc., etc. We still believe in communism, but not in Soviet Union, because you could make the argument that communism as an ideology is a legitimate political ideology. Then you have the whole Soviet Union thing and the crimes of communist countries. So you could potentially separate them. And then you have the far right, which from the get-go it's xenophobia, racism, discrimination, hate crime, and all that. So it's hard-coded in the ideology itself. And so you can't say no, but the Nazi were just it's just far right gone wrong. It's not a problem with the far right. It's just far right that went that went wrong, and the far right parties are actually a fine ideology. No, it's rotten from the get-go. So you, even if you can make legitimate criticism to communism, and the Communist Party even today can be criticized for being pretty tolerant to a number of things. You can look at the very problematic position of a number of far left parties, or even sometimes just left parties, towards Russia, towards a number of leftist or communist countries, towards China, towards Venezuela, towards even some of them towards North Korea. Sure, you can make the criticism, and even if there is not a cordon sanitaire, the communist parties usually are not seen as completely normal parties. There's still a bit of a different treatment, especially if you're in Eastern Europe, etc. So yeah, I would not equate far-right parties to communist parties. Definitely not, because in far-right ideology, there's something rotten at the core. And it's the ideology that is rotten. That's it. Communism, sure, plenty of crime were made in the name of communism. But the ideology itself, you read Karl Marx, you can say, okay, there is the ideology of Marxism is not necessarily criminal in itself. Even if and that's what I'm saying, for Eastern Europeans, communist parties are definitely not popular because they have the past of the Soviet Union, etc., etc. So you have also national perspective around this. But yeah, bottom line is, far-right parties are not... You can't equate far-right parties to far-left parties, and there is a legitimate concern that normalization is dangerous for far-right parties. And it's not just like a label put by liberals because they don't think the same. What else? Actually, I think I finished my list pretty much. Anything on your side you want me to discuss or provide additional explanations or stuff like that? Otherwise, we conclude and we stop there. Drink some water. How are the protests going in France? I haven't looked. Everything that I saw today was saying that the protests were very strong. So I would say that contrary to what the government might have been hoping, the protests are not going away. But I haven't seen numbers or anything. Let's see. There was a huge strike today in Strasbourg. Not surprising, there were strikes everywhere in France. Voyons voir. Manifestation. I can't see numbers for now. Manifestation 31 janvier. No, I don't see numbers, like just from a quick search on Twitter, so we'll see. But I would say that they say it was in the millions. Yeah. The first day it was between 1 and 2 million people, depending on the police or the trade unions. Here it's a lot of people as well, so I would not be surprised if it's again more than 1 million people or potentially 2 million people or more in the streets today. But I don't have the figures. Sorry. So, but definitely protests are going strong. I would say. All right. Let's stop there. It's still need to eat and do stuff. So we're going to stop there. I hope that you enjoyed the interview. The 70th MEP to come on the channel. Next time I see you tomorrow, we do a news review at 7. Yeah, 7. We're going to discuss the latest EU news, and then it's going to be on Sunday in French for another news review. And then next week is going to be another interview, but I'll give you the news about that in due time. As usual, if it's not already the case, do follow the channel. You can even subscribe if you really like what you see. It's always very much appreciated, and it helps. Here in the chat, I put all my social media, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, all the good things. And yeah, on this note, I wish you all a very good evening, and I hope to see you tomorrow or on another occasion. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.